Alex Stone stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, watching the city wake up 30 floors below. At 28, he owned 3 buildings in this skyline and had enough money in the bank to buy 3 more. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. Sharp suit, perfect hair, cold eyes. Everything exactly as it should be. His phone buzzed on the marble counter. Nina, his assistant, always texted at 7 sharp. Your schedule for today, board meeting at 9. Lunch with investors at 12:30. Drinks with Rebecca at 8. Alex smiled. Rebecca. Tall, smart, gorgeous lawyer who understood the rules. No messy emotions, no expectations beyond expensive dinners and nights that ended before sunrise. Perfect. He walked to his kitchen, all black granite and steel appliances he never used. The coffee machine, worth more than most people's cars, made his usual double espresso. As he sipped it, he thought about Rebecca. 3 months now, and she was getting that look. The look that meant she wanted to talk about where this is going. Time to end it. Alex had learned long ago that endings were easier than beginnings. Clean cuts hurt less than slow bleeds. He would send flowers today with a nice note. Something about focusing on work. She would understand. They always did. His phone rang. Luke, his college roommate and one of the few people who still called him by his first name instead of Mr. Stone. Morning, sunshine. Luke's voice was annoyingly cheerful. Got a minute? I have exactly 3 minutes before I need to leave. Alex walked toward his bedroom, phone pressed to his ear. Perfect. Listen, Amy has this friend. Really great girl. I think you'd like her. Alex stopped walking. You want to set me up? It's been too long since you dated anyone normal, man. This girl is different. She's a nurse, super down to earth, actually cares about people. Sounds boring. Come on, Alex, one dinner. What's the worst that could happen? Alex opened his walk-in closet. Rows of identical expensive suits hanging like soldiers. The worst that could happen? She could want something real. Then I'd have to hurt her feelings. Then Amy gets mad at you. Then your relationship suffers. Then you blame me. You're overthinking this. I'm being realistic. Alex pulled out a navy suit, the same one he wore to close his first $1 million deal. Besides, I don't do blind dates. You don't do anything that involves actual human connection. The words hit harder than Luke probably meant them to. Alex stared at himself in the full-length mirror. When had his life become so empty? Look, Luke continued. Her name is Grace. She just moved here from Portland. Doesn't know anyone. Amy thinks you two would hit it off. Does she know who I am? You mean, does she know you're rich? No, Amy just told her you're a nice guy who works in tech. Alex almost laughed. Nice guy. If only Luke knew about the 3 companies Alex had bought just to shut them down. If only he knew about the employees who lost jobs because Alex wanted their patents. If only he knew about Rebecca, or the woman before her, or the one before that. I'll think about it, Alex said, which they both knew meant no. The restaurant is Antonio's on 5th Street, Saturday at 7. I already made the reservation. The line went dead. Luke had hung up before Alex could argue. Alex finished getting dressed, his mind already moving to the board meeting. Quarterly profits were up 18%. The new app was testing well in focus groups. Everything was on track. His driver waited outside the building, same as every morning. Alex slid into the back seat of the black sedan and opened his laptop. Emails flooded his screen. Nina had already filtered out the unimportant ones, leaving only the messages that needed his personal attention. One caught his eye. Rebecca had sent a message an hour ago. Can we talk today? I have something important to tell you. Alex deleted it without responding. He would deal with Rebecca later. Right now, he had bigger concerns. The board meeting went exactly as Alex expected. Old men in expensive suits nodded at his presentation and asked predictable questions. He answered each one with precision, watching their faces for signs of doubt or hesitation. There were none. They trusted him completely, and why wouldn't they? He had made them all very wealthy. After the meeting, Alex found himself walking through downtown instead of taking his car to lunch. The streets buzzed with normal people living normal lives. A couple argued outside a coffee shop. A mother pushed a stroller while talking on her phone. An old man fed pigeons on a bench. Alex tried to remember the last time he had walked anywhere without a destination. The last time he had noticed regular people doing regular things. The last time he had felt anything real. His phone rang. Nina again. Rebecca called the office. She wants to know if you're free for dinner tonight instead of drinks. Tell her no. Actually, tell her I need to focus on work for a while. Send flowers. The usual. The usual breakup flowers? Yes, Nina paused. In 5 years of working together, she had never questioned his personal choices. Alex, can I ask you something? Go ahead. Are you happy? The question stopped him cold. He stood in the middle of the sidewalk while people walked around him like water around a stone. Why would you ask that? You seem different lately, more distant than usual. I'm fine, Nina, just focused on business. Another pause. Luke called the office. He wanted to confirm you'll be at dinner Saturday night. I never agreed to that. He seemed pretty certain you'd show up. Alex closed his eyes. Luke was his oldest friend, the only person who remembered him before the money and success. The only person who still saw him as the kid who used to stay up all night playing video games and eating pizza. Fine. One dinner, but make sure Luke knows this is a one-time thing. That evening, Alex sat in his penthouse with a glass of whiskey, looking at the city lights below. Somewhere out there, Grace the nurse was probably getting ready for bed after a long day of taking care of people. Somewhere out there, regular people were having real conversations, making real connections, building real relationships. Alex had built an empire, but he had never built anything that mattered to another human being. He had everything money could buy, but nothing money couldn't replace. His phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. I understand. Take care of yourself, Alex. You deserve more than you think you do. The words echoed in his empty apartment. He deserved more than he thought he did. But what did he think he deserved? What did he even want? Saturday night was 3 days away. 3 days to prepare for something he had spent years avoiding. A real conversation with someone who didn't want anything from him except maybe a pleasant evening. For the first time in years, Alex Stone wasn't sure he was ready for what came next. Saturday evening arrived faster than Alex expected. He sat in Antonio's restaurant checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. 7:15. She was late. This was already going exactly as he predicted. Grace was probably one of those people who couldn't manage time, who thought showing up late was charming instead of disrespectful. He had dealt with enough of these types to know the pattern. Alex sipped his water and planned his escape. Give her another 10 minutes, make polite conversation for exactly 1 hour, then find a reason to leave. Simple, clean, no complications. The restaurant door opened, and a woman rushed in, looking around frantically. She wore a simple black dress, but Alex could see blue scrubs peeking out from underneath. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she looked like she had been running. Alex? She approached his table, slightly out of breath. I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm Grace. He stood up, automatically shifting into his polite mode. No problem. Please, sit down. Grace slid into the chair across from him, still catching her breath. I know there's no excuse for being late, but we had an emergency surgery that ran way longer than expected. This little boy came in with appendicitis and there were complications, and I couldn't leave until I knew he was okay. Alex blinked. Most women he dated would have blamed traffic or couldn't find parking. They certainly wouldn't have mentioned work, especially not work involving sick children. Is he all right? The question came out before Alex could stop himself. Grace's face lit up. Yes, thank goodness. He's going to be fine. His mom was so scared, and she's been by herself since his dad deployed overseas. I just couldn't leave her alone until the surgery was done. A waitress appeared at their table. Alex ordered wine, something expensive that usually impressed his dates. Grace asked for coffee. Coffee at dinner? Alex asked. I've been awake for 16 hours. If I don't get caffeine, I might fall asleep in my pasta. Grace smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Alex had seen in months. As they looked at their menus, Alex found himself studying her. Grace wasn't like the women he usually dated. She didn't check her reflection in every surface. Didn't ask about his car or his apartment. Didn't seem to care that his watch cost more than most people's rent. So Luke tells me you work in tech, Grace said after they ordered. What kind of company? We develop apps. Business solutions, mostly. Alex gave his usual vague answer. He had learned that talking about his actual worth made conversations complicated. That sounds interesting. Did you always want to work with computers? The question caught him off guard. Actually, no. I started college pre-med. Really? What changed your mind? Alex stared at her. When was the last time someone had asked him about his choices instead of his successes? I guess. So I realized I was better with numbers than people. Grace laughed. Numbers are definitely easier to predict than people, but they're also less interesting. Their food arrived and Alex waited for the usual dinner conversation. Complaints about work, gossip about mutual friends, subtle questions about his lifestyle. Instead, Grace told him about her patients. The elderly man who sang opera songs while she changed his bandages. The teenage girl who was scared about surgery but tried to act tough. The way Grace talked about these people, Alex could see she actually cared about them. What about you? Grace asked. Do you like what you do? The question hit him harder than it should have. I'm good at it. That's not what I asked. Alex looked up from his plate. Grace was watching him with curious eyes, not judgment, just genuine interest. I don't know if I've ever thought about whether I like it or not. It's just what I do. That sounds lonely. The word hung in the air between them. Lonely. Alex had never used that word to describe his life, but hearing it from Grace made something twist in his chest. Before he could respond, Grace's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face immediately changed. I'm so sorry, she said, already standing up. There's been an emergency with one of my patients. I have to go to the hospital, this was it. The moment Alex had been waiting for. The polite excuse, the quick exit, the end of an evening that was getting too real too fast. I understand, he heard himself say. I'll call you a cab. Grace was already putting on her jacket. It's okay, I can take the bus. I'm really sorry, Alex, this was really nice. She was halfway to the door when Alex surprised himself. Wait, I'll drive you. Grace turned around, confusion on her face. You don't have to do that. I want to. The ride to the hospital was quiet. Grace stared out the window, clearly worried about whatever emergency had called her back to work. Alex found himself stealing glances at her, wondering what it felt like to care about something that much. You can just drop me off at the front entrance, Grace said as they pulled into the hospital parking lot. But Alex found himself parking the car instead. I'll walk you in. The hospital hit Alex like a wall of antiseptic and anxiety. He had avoided places like this his entire adult life. Too many memories of his grandmother's final days. Too many reminders of things money couldn't fix. Grace transformed the moment they walked through the doors. The slightly awkward dinner companion vanished, replaced by someone confident and focused. She moved through the hallways like she owned them, greeting other staff members, asking quick questions about patients. They took an elevator to the pediatric floor. Alex followed Grace down a hallway lined with colorful murals until she stopped outside a room with a small window. Through the glass, Alex could see a little boy, maybe 8 years old, lying in bed with tears streaming down his face. An older woman sat beside him holding his hand. That's Tommy, Grace said quietly. The boy from the surgery earlier. And that's his grandmother. She's been taking care of him since his mom got sick last year. Grace knocked softly and entered the room. Alex stayed in the hallway watching through the window. He saw Grace kneel beside the bed, speaking quietly to the boy. Within minutes, Tommy's tears stopped. He even managed a small smile when Grace showed him something on her phone, probably pictures or a game. Then Grace turned to the grandmother, an elderly woman who looked exhausted and scared. Alex couldn't hear the conversation, but he could see Grace's hand on the woman's shoulder, her calm presence making the older woman's tension fade. After 20 minutes, Grace came back to the hallway. His fever broke. He was scared because he woke up and didn't know where he was. You came back to the hospital for that? Grace looked at Alex like he had asked why she breathed air. He's 8 years old and he was scared. They walked back through the hospital in silence. Alex kept thinking about what he had just witnessed. He had spent years around people who talked about making a difference, who donated money to charity for tax write-offs, who attended fundraising galas to be seen helping others. But Grace had just driven across town at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night because a child was afraid. In the parking lot, Grace turned to face him. Thank you for driving me, and I'm really sorry about dinner. Alex looked at her standing under the hospital lights, still in her dress with scrubs showing underneath, her hair falling out of its bun from a long day of taking care of people. She was nothing like anyone he had ever known. Would you like to get coffee sometime? He asked. Grace smiled that genuine smile again. I'd like that. As Alex drove home, he realized something had changed. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about business strategies or quarterly reports or his next acquisition. He was thinking about an 8-year-old boy named Tommy and the woman who had driven across town just to make sure he wasn't scared. He was thinking about Grace and the strange feeling in his chest that he was afraid to name. The coffee shop Grace chose wasn't anything like the places Alex usually went. No marble counters or leather chairs, just mismatched furniture and local artwork covering every wall. The coffee came in chipped mugs instead of designer cups, and it was the best he'd ever tasted. "This place has been here for 20 years, Grace said, settling into a worn armchair across from him. The owner, Mrs. Patterson, knows everyone's order by heart. Alex looked around the small space. A college student typed on an ancient laptop in the corner. An elderly couple shared a newspaper and a blueberry muffin. A young mother bounced a baby while sipping tea with one hand. "How did you find this place?" "I walked past it my first week here. I was feeling homesick and lost, and Mrs. Patterson saw me looking through the window. She invited me in and wouldn't let me pay for my coffee." Grace smiled at the memory. She said every newcomer gets one free coffee and all the advice they can handle. This was Alex's third coffee date with Grace, and each one surprised him more than the last. She didn't talk about designer clothes or expensive restaurants. Instead, she told him about the book club she'd joined, the community garden where she volunteered on weekends, the cooking class she wanted to take. "What about you?" Grace asked. "What do you do when you're not working?" The question stumped him. What did he do? He went to business dinners, attended networking events, traveled to conferences. But those were all work-related. "I read financial reports," he said finally. Grace laughed, thinking he was joking. When she realized he was serious, her expression softened. "That's really how you spend your free time?" "I don't really have free time. Everyone has free time. They just choose how to use it." Alex thought about his evenings in the penthouse, his weekends reviewing business proposals, his vacations that were really just extended work trips. "I guess I've never thought about it that way." "Come with me," Grace said suddenly, standing up. "Where?" "I want to show you something." They walked 6 blocks through a part of the city Alex had never explored. The buildings were older here, with small shops and restaurants tucked between apartment buildings. Grace stopped in front of a community garden squeezed between 2 brick buildings. "This is where I volunteer," she said, opening the gate. Alex followed her into a small oasis of green in the middle of urban concrete. Raised beds held vegetables and flowers. A small greenhouse sat in one corner. Benches were scattered throughout, and Alex could see the city skyline through the trees. "The neighborhood association started this 5 years ago," Grace explained, kneeling beside a bed of tomatoes. "Everyone gets a plot, and we share the tools and knowledge. Mrs. Chen from the corner store grows the most amazing cucumbers. And David, the guy who runs the bookstore, has somehow managed to grow orchids out here." Alex watched Grace check the plants, pulling a few weeds, adjusting a support stake for a drooping vine. She moved with the same focused care he'd seen her show her patients. "Do you have a plot?" he asked. "Right over here." Grace led him to a small section filled with herbs and lettuce. "I'm still learning, but it's peaceful. There's something amazing about putting a seed in dirt and watching it become food." Alex knelt beside her as she showed him the different plants: basil, oregano, parsley, lettuce varieties he'd never heard of. Everything she'd grown herself with her own hands. "When I was a kid," Grace said, still focused on the plants, "my grandmother had a garden like this. Much bigger, but the same idea. She used to say that growing things taught you patience and hope. You plant something not knowing if it will grow, but believing it will. What if it doesn't grow? Then you try again. Maybe with different seeds or better soil or more water. But you try again." They spent an hour in the garden. Grace introduced him to other volunteers who stopped by. David, the bookstore owner, Mrs. Chen with her perfect cucumbers, a teenager named Carlos who was growing peppers for his family's restaurant. Everyone knew Grace, and everyone seemed genuinely happy to see her. Walking back to her apartment, Alex realized he'd just spent 2 hours not thinking about work once. Not checking his phone, not calculating profits, not planning his next move. He'd just been present in the moment, listening to Grace talk about soil and seasons and the way plants grew toward light. "Can I ask you something?" Grace said as they reached her building, a modest apartment complex with flower boxes in the windows. "Sure. Why don't you ever talk about your famille?" The question caught Alex off guard. In all his previous relationships, this topic never came up. The women he dated were more interested in his net worth than his personal history. Not much to talk about, he said carefully. Everyone has family stories. Alex found himself telling Grace about his parents' divorce when he was 12, how they'd used him as a messenger, a spy, a weapon against each other, how he'd learned that love was just another word for leverage, another way to hurt or be hurt. After that, I decided it was easier to keep things simple, he finished. Grace was quiet for a moment. That sounds really lonely. It's safe. Same thing sometimes. The next weekend, Grace invited him to her nephew's birthday party. Alex's first instinct was to say no. Family parties weren't his thing. But something about the way Grace asked, hopeful but not pushy, made him agree. The party was in a small backyard in the suburbs. Kids ran around with balloons while adults chatted over plastic cups of punch. Grace's brother Mike was friendly and normal, asking Alex about his work but not prying. Grace's sister-in-law Amy thanked him for making Grace happy. She talks about you all the time, Amy said while Grace was inside getting cake. It's nice to see her excited about someone. Alex watched Grace emerge from the house carrying a birthday cake, surrounded by children who clearly adored her. She caught his eye across the yard and smiled, and something in his chest tightened. This was what normal looked like. Family gatherings where people genuinely enjoyed each other's company, children who felt safe and loved, adults who had built something real together. Uncle Alex! The birthday boy, 5-year-old Tyler, ran up to him. Want to see my new bike? Uncle Alex. The kid had just met him, but Grace had clearly talked about him enough that Tyler felt comfortable using family words. Alex spent the afternoon being shown toys, asked to judge drawing contests, and recruited for a game of catch that he was terrible at. When it was time to leave, Tyler hugged his legs and asked when he was coming back. Driving Grace home, Alex felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Contentment. Not the satisfaction of closing a deal or the rush of making money. Just quiet happiness, thank you, he said as they pulled up to her building. For what? For today? For showing me what normal families look like. Grace squeezed his hand. That could be your normal too, you know. That night, alone in his penthouse, Alex looked out at the city lights and thought about gardens and birthday parties and children who called him uncle. He thought about Grace's hand in his, warm and real and completely without agenda. For the first time in his adult life, Alex Stone wanted something money couldn't buy. He wanted what Grace had shown him was possible, a life built on connection instead of protection, on trust instead of transactions. The realization terrified him more than any business deal ever had. Monday morning hit Alex like cold water. Sitting in his office, surrounded by familiar walls and familiar problems, the weekend felt like a dream. Or maybe a warning. He stared at his phone where 3 text messages from Grace waited. Nothing pushy, just normal things. A photo of tomatoes from the garden. A funny story about one of her patients. An invitation to dinner Tuesday night. Alex set the phone aside without responding. Nina. He called to his assistant through the open door. Get Rachel Phillips on the phone. Rachel, beautiful, successful marketing executive who never asked personal questions. They'd had an arrangement 2 years ago, before Grace, before everything got complicated. Rachel Phillips? Nina looked confused. Didn't you stop seeing her because she wanted something serious? Just make the call. That evening, Alex sat across from Rachel at an expensive restaurant downtown. She looked exactly the same. Perfectly styled, designer everything. Conversation focused on work and mutual acquaintances. Exactly what he used to want. You look good, Alex, Rachel said over wine that cost more per bottle than most people made in a week. Success suits you. You look good too. The words felt automatic, empty. So what changed your mind about calling me? Alex gave her his practiced smile. I miss the company. They fell back into their old pattern. Surface-level conversation about business, mutual friends, places they'd traveled. No messy emotions, no talk about families or dreams or fears. Safe territory. But something was wrong. Alex found himself comparing everything to Grace. Rachel's laugh sounded fake next to Grace's genuine joy. Her stories about closing deals felt shallow compared to Grace's passion for helping patients. Even Rachel's beauty seemed artificial now, all polish and no warmth. Earth to Alex, Rachel said, waving her hand in front of his face. Where did you go? Sorry, long day at work. You're different, she observed. more distant than usual. And that's saying something. Alex forced himself to focus on Rachel, to remember why this arrangement had worked before. No complications, no vulnerability, no risk of getting hurt. Everything under his control. They went back to Rachel's apartment. Her place was as perfect as she was. All white furniture and expensive art, nothing out of place. Nothing personal enough to tell a real story about who lived there. As Rachel opened a bottle of champagne, Alex's phone buzzed with another text from Grace, just a simple, "Hope you had a good day." "Expecting someone?" Rachel asked, noticing him staring at his phone. "No," Alex said, turning it off completely. The next few weeks became a blur of old patterns. Business dinners with people who only cared about his money. Expensive dates with women who never asked how he was really feeling. Late nights at the office because going home meant sitting alone with thoughts he didn't want to have. Alex threw himself into work like drowning man grabbing for rope. He started negotiations to buy out a smaller tech company, not because he needed it, but because the deal would consume all his time and energy. "You've been working 18-hour days for 2 weeks straight," Nina observed, bringing him his 5th coffee of the afternoon. "When's the last time you went home before midnight?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You look terrible." Alex glanced at his reflection in his computer screen. Nina was right. He looked exhausted, hollow, like he was running on empty. His phone, which he'd been ignoring for days, had 17 missed calls from Luke. Alex finally called him back. "About time," Luke answered on the first ring. "I've been trying to reach you for a week. I've been busy." "Too busy to return calls from your oldest friend?" Alex rubbed his eyes. "What do you want, Luke?" "Amy's worried about Grace. She says Grace seems sad but won't talk about what happened with you two." The words hit Alex in the chest. "Nothing happened." "Bull. You disappeared, Alex. Grace went from talking about you constantly to not mentioning you at all. That doesn't just happen. We weren't serious. It was just casual." Luke was quiet for a long moment. "You know what? I don't believe you. And more importantly, I don't think you believe yourself." After Luke hung up, Alex sat in his office staring out at the city. Somewhere out there, Grace was probably finishing her shift at the hospital, maybe stopping by the community garden, definitely making someone's day better just by being herself. And here he was, hiding in his tower of money and success, more alone than he'd ever been. His computer chimed with an email. Rachel suggesting dinner Friday night. Alex stared at the message, trying to remember why he'd thought going backward would solve anything. Friday came anyway. Alex met Rachel at another expensive restaurant, ordered another overpriced bottle of wine, made another attempt at conversation that felt like reading from a script. "You're not here," Rachel said halfway through dinner. "What do you mean?" "Physically, yes, but your mind is somewhere else, or with someone else." She set down her wine glass. "Look, Alex, I don't know what happened with whoever she is, but you're wasting both our time." Alex started to deny it, but Rachel held up her hand. "I'm not stupid. 2 years ago, you were present when we were together. Cold maybe, but present. Tonight you're a ghost." She stood up, gathering her purse. "Whatever you're running from, running toward me isn't going to fix it." Alone at the table, Alex finally admitted the truth to himself. Nothing felt right anymore. Food had no taste. Conversations had no meaning. Success felt empty. Everything that used to satisfy him now felt like he was going through the motions of someone else's life. Walking home through the city streets, Alex found himself near Grace's neighborhood. Without planning it, he ended up outside the community garden. It was late, after 10, but the gate was open and security lights cast long shadows across the plants. He walked to Grace's plot, where her herbs and vegetables grew in neat, careful rows. Someone had been watering them. Probably Grace, probably every day, taking care of living things the way she took care of everything else. Alex knelt beside the basil plants Grace had shown him weeks ago. They were bigger now, healthier, reaching toward the light just like she'd said they would. That's when he saw her, Grace walking toward him through the garden paths carrying a watering can. "Alex?" She looked genuinely surprised to see him. "I'm sorry," he said, standing up quickly. "I didn't mean to. I was just walking and it's okay." Grace set down the watering can. "I come here when I can't sleep. It helps me think." They stood 3 feet apart in the dim light, surrounded by growing things and the quiet hum of the city around them. Grace looked tired, sadder than Alex remembered. Because of him, he realized. "Grace, you don't have to explain," she said softly. "I understand," but she didn't understand, Alex realized. She thought he'd left because he didn't care enough. The truth was exactly the opposite. He'd left because he cared too much, because caring that much terrified him more than any business risk ever had. "I should go," he said. Grace nodded. "Take care of yourself, Alex." As he walked away, Alex felt something break inside his chest. Grace hadn't begged him to stay, hadn't demanded explanations, hadn't made a scene. She'd just accepted his choice to leave with the same grace she brought to everything else. But her sadness followed him home. And for the first time in weeks, Alex faced the truth he'd been running from. He hadn't protected himself by pushing Grace away. He'd just guaranteed that the one thing that had ever made him truly happy was gone. Standing in his empty penthouse, looking out at the city lights that no longer impressed him, Alex finally understood what he'd lost. And what he might have thrown away forever. Alex didn't sleep that night, or the next night, or the night after that. He sat in his penthouse staring at his phone, typing messages to Grace that he never sent. "I'm sorry. Delete. I made a mistake. Delete. I miss you. Delete. Nothing felt like enough. How do you apologize for running away from the best thing that ever happened to you?" Thursday morning, Nina found him still in his office clothes from the day before, staring out the window. "Alex, you look terrible. Thanks for the pep talk. I'm serious. When's the last time you ate? Or went home? Or talked to another human being about something other than work?" Alex turned to look at his assistant, who had been putting up with his mood for weeks. "Nina, can I ask you something?" "Sure. How do you fix something when you don't even know if it can be fixed?" Nina studied his face. "You're talking about that nurse, aren't you? Grace, how did you—" "Luke called the office 6 times. Plus, you've been miserable since you stopped seeing her. It doesn't take a detective to figure it out." Nina sat down across from him. "What happened?" For the first time in years, Alex told someone the truth. About his parents' divorce. About building walls to protect himself. About meeting Grace and feeling things he'd never felt before. About getting scared and running back to what felt safe. "And now she probably hates me," he finished. Nina was quiet for a moment. "Do you love her?" The question hung in the air between them. Alex had never said that word out loud about anyone. "Yes," he whispered. "Then stop sitting here feeling sorry for yourself and go tell her that." "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. You love her, tell her. If she says no, at least you tried. If you don't try, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened." That afternoon, Alex stood outside the hospital where Grace worked, holding a cup of coffee from Mrs. Patterson's shop. He'd been there for an hour, watching people go in and out, building up courage. When Grace finally emerged, she looked tired. Alex could see dark circles under her eyes, and something in her posture suggested sadness. "Because of him, Grace," he called out. She turned, surprised. "Alex, what are you doing here?" He walked toward her, holding out the coffee. "Peace offering. From Mrs. Patterson's." Grace looked at the cup but didn't take it. "Alex, I can't do this anymore." The back and forth, the confusion. "I need to know where I stand." "You stand everywhere," Alex said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "You stand in my thoughts every morning when I wake up. You stand in every business meeting when I wonder what you'd think about how I treat people. You stand in my empty apartment when I realize I've built a life with everything except the things that actually matter." Grace stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you. And I'm saying I was an idiot for running away when I figured that out. Alex, I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I hurt you. But I also know that every day without you feels like I'm living someone else's life." Alex set the coffee cup on a nearby bench. "I've spent my whole adult life protecting myself from feeling anything real. And then you came along and made me want to feel everything." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Do you know what it was like watching you disappear? One day we're talking about books and gardens and dreams, and the next day you won't even return my calls. I was scared. Of what? Of this. Of caring about someone more than I care about protecting myself. Of building something real with someone and having it fall apart." Alex took a step closer. "My parents destroyed each other, Grace. I watched love turn into a weapon. I swore I'd never let that happen to me. So you decided never to love anyone?" "I decided never to love anyone until I met someone worth the risk." Grace wiped her eyes. "And you think I'm worth the risk?" I think you're worth every risk. I think you're worth changing my entire life for." They stood on the hospital sidewalk as people walked around them. Two people trying to figure out if broken things could be fixed. "How do I know you won't run away again when things get hard?" Grace asked. "Because I've tried living without you and it's the worst thing I've ever experienced." Alex reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small key. "I bought something. I want to show you." Grace looked at the key suspiciously. "What is it?" "Come with me and find out." They drove across town to a neighborhood Grace had never seen before. Alex parked in front of a small house with a front yard that had clearly been neglected but had good bones. "I bought it yesterday," Alex said as they stood on the sidewalk. "It needs work. A lot of work. But it has potential." Grace looked confused. "You bought a house?" "I bought a home, or the possibility of one." Alex opened the front door and led her inside. The rooms were empty but filled with sunlight. "Look out the back window." Grace walked to the kitchen window and gasped. The backyard was huge, overgrown, but full of possibilities. "Alex, this is big enough for a real garden. Big enough for kids to play. Big enough for birthday parties and family dinners and all the things you showed me I was missing." Grace turned to face him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to build something with you. Not just a relationship, but a life. A real life with mess and complications and fights about whose turn it is to do dishes." Alex moved closer to her. "I'm saying I want to learn how to be the kind of person who deserves someone like you. Alex, you can't just buy a house and expect—" "I'm not expecting anything. I'm hoping. I'm asking." Alex took her hands. "I'm asking if you'll help me figure out how to be human again. I'm asking if you'll teach me how to care about things that can't be controlled or calculated or bought." Grace looked around the empty kitchen, then back at Alex. "What if we're too different? What if I can't fit into your world? What if you don't have to? What if I change my world instead? What does that mean?" Alex pulled out his phone and showed her a document. "I'm starting a foundation, using half my money to build free clinics in underserved neighborhoods. I want to do something that matters, something that helps people like your patients." Grace stared at the phone screen. "Half your money? Money doesn't make me happy, Grace. You do. Watching you care about people makes me happy. The idea of building something meaningful together makes me happy." Alex put his phone away. "I can't promise I won't mess this up sometimes. I can't promise I won't get scared or make mistakes. But I can promise I'll never run away again." Grace walked to the back door and looked out at the overgrown yard. Alex could see her imagining the possibilities. Raised garden beds, fruit trees, maybe a swing set someday. Mrs. Patterson says every newcomer gets one free coffee and all the advice they can handle. Grace said finally, "What's her advice?" Grace turned back to Alex, and for the first time in weeks she smiled. "She says sometimes the best things in life are the ones that scare you the most." 6 months later, Alex stood in that same backyard, no longer overgrown but transformed into the garden Grace had envisioned. Raised beds full of vegetables, fruit trees they'd planted together, a small greenhouse Alex had built with his own hands and a lot of help from YouTube videos. They were hosting a dinner party. Grace's idea, of course. Luke and Amy were there with their kids, Mrs. Patterson from the coffee shop, David from the bookstore, some of Grace's co-workers from the hospital, even Nina, who had become Grace's friend. Alex watched Grace move through their guests, making sure everyone felt welcome, checking on the kids, laughing at Luke's terrible jokes. She caught his eye across the yard and smiled, the same smile that had changed everything that night at the hospital. "Uncle Alex." Tyler ran up to him, now 6 years old and still calling him family. "The tomatoes are ready." Alex knelt down to Tyler's level. "Want to help me pick them for dinner?" As they worked in the garden together, Alex thought about the man he used to be. The empty penthouse, the meaningless relationships, the walls he'd built to keep everyone out. That man had been successful, but he'd never been happy. He'd never known what it felt like to plant seeds and watch them grow. He'd never experienced the joy of a child calling him uncle. He'd never understood that the best investment he could ever make wasn't in stocks or real estate or businesses. The best investment he'd ever made was in love. In Grace. In the life they were building together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one shared moment at a time. Alex Stone had been an icy young millionaire who thought he wanted nothing more than surface-level connections. But it turned out what he really wanted was exactly what he'd found: someone to build a real life with, someone worth changing for, someone who made him want to be the best version of himself. Standing in his garden, surrounded by friends and family and the woman he loved, Alex finally understood what rich really meant.